Squash balls. Which one should you use? Which squash ball to use is quite a hot topic in the squash community at the moment, with a lot of people saying that double yellow dots are overused. Now, before we begin, let me just explain the different squash balls that are available and how they're different. Each squash ball has a different bounciness or speed. Now, essentially, the better the player you are, the slower the ball you should use. This is because at a higher level, players are able to warm the ball up easier, so they'll still get decent bounce on a ball that isn't meant to bounce as much. Higher level players tend to be quicker around the court too, so that means a less bouncy ball won't be an issue. Now, the least bouncy ball we're going to be talking about today is actually the double yellow dot. Now, this is probably the most controversial ball at the moment, because at a club level, a lot of people are using this ball when they should be using a bouncier ball to make the rallies longer and to make the match overall more enjoyable. So, when do I think the double yellow dot is the correct ball to use? Well, I think if you're a higher level player and you're playing in a tournament or you're playing a team match or even a friendly, a double yellow dot's fine. A lot of people have an issue with juniors using it, but to be honest, when I was playing junior, I hated playing with anything that wasn't a double yellow dot, and I don't feel like the rallies were too short. So I feel like if you're a high level junior, it's completely fine. Now, there are occasions when even I now would prefer to use a bouncier ball, and that would be if the court is particularly cold. So a lot of clubs, particularly in England, have quite cold courts, especially the older clubs with worse insulation. And in those scenarios, actually going to a bouncier ball, that we'll look at in a minute, can provide for a more enjoyable game. Another time when I might not use a double yellow dot is if I'm doing a solo routine, particularly if you're practicing your short game, where the ball's not really going to warm up because you're not hitting it that hard. So using a bouncier ball can actually provide for a more realistic experience as if you're on a warm court in match play scenarios. As you can see here, this is the Dunlop double yellow dot. Now, this is the most commonly used double yellow dot, and in my opinion, they are the best. The consistency of them isn't as good as they used to be. You get some that are a bit quicker and some that are a bit slower, but overall, I think it provides for the best experience. A lot of the other brands use thicker rubber and they're all really quick or all really dead in some scenarios, and it just means that the overall experience for those ones, while maybe more consistent, it's more like worse every time. Dunlop call their double yellow dot ball their pro ball, so if you're looking for it online, then you know what that means. One negative I would say about the Dunlop double yellow dots nowadays that didn't used to be the case is if you look closely here, I don't know if you can see, but even though this ball is relatively new, it's actually got quite shiny. And the reason for this is they used to have a more textured material on the outside of the ball. Just what it was made of had more texture to it, which meant that it had more grip. Whereas with these ones, it's got a smoother surface. And this changed a few years ago. The other day I played with a ball that was actually one of the old ones. It was quite interesting going back to that and how different it felt. But what it can mean is on some courts, especially if it's a bit dusty, it can get pretty skiddy pretty quickly, which obviously isn't ideal, but I think overall they're good. Now we're going to talk about a slightly faster ball, and that is the Dunlop competition ball, or otherwise known as the single yellow dot. Now, this is slightly bouncier than a double yellow dot, but in my opinion, I very rarely use this ball. Reason being, if I am on a really cold court, I'd rather use something even bouncier than this. And if I'm not, then I'd rather use a double yellow dot. So almost by it being the middle ground, I feel like it loses a little bit of value. Now, what I would say is, if you are a relatively competent player, but you're not really experienced, and you're not on a court that's really hot, then this is probably the one for you. So let's say you're on kind of a slightly colder court, but not freezing, and you don't hit the ball particularly hard or consistently, then using a single yellow dot is probably going to give you the best experience. Now we're going to move on to one of my favourite balls, and that is the red dot. Now, the red dot, for me, is actually the sweet spot of a ball that can be used on a cold court and for a solo practice, and it kind of puts a bit less strain on your arm if you're just practicing trying to be accurate without having to put too much force into it if it's a really, really freezing court. It's also great for juniors or beginners, because they won't need to warm the ball up a lot, and it just allows for a really enjoyable experience. I use it a lot when coaching, I use it when training. It's also really useful if you're practicing your hand speed, your racket head speed, because the ball will come faster off the front wall, so it'll force you to react quicker. So it can be used for your own improvement too in that regard as well. Now, here's the interesting part about the red dot, and that is that a lot of people buy the wrong one. A lot of people buy this, the Dunlop Progress Ball. Yeah. Now, if we take a look at this, you might not be able to see it here, but this Progress Ball is significantly larger than this red dot I've got here, which is actually a Technofiber red dot. Now, the problem with that is because it's larger, it's also heavier. And it being heavier has a massive negative impact on how it feels to play with, on how it comes off the strings and all that sort of thing. So, I would really recommend not buying the Dunlop red dot, and instead buying either a Technofiber or a Caracal red dot, because these feel great. They're the same weight as a normal squash ball, or there and thereabouts, same size, and they feel like you're hitting with a normal squash ball, but it just bounces more. So don't buy the Dunlop ones for these. A lot of clubs get them, and people try using them thinking they're using a good red dot, and they have a rubbish time, because I don't even think they bounce that much because they're heavier as well. So avoid these Dunlop red dots. Going one step further, we have the blue dot. Now, the blue dot is even bouncier than the red dot, and for me it's just too bouncy. You'd probably use it with complete beginners, so the ball really sits up and sits up in the air for as long as possible, to give them as long as possible to hit the ball. But generally, I think it flies way too fast, and I don't think you should use it over a red dot in most scenarios. Now, similar to the red dot, we have this Dunlop intro ball, which I'm going to open again. And this is also bigger than this Technofiber version that I have. Again, don't make the mistake, like I said before, with the red dot, don't buy these Dunlop ones. They're really heavy, they're really nasty to play with, they're just not fun. And I always feel like they're going to break your strings if you hit with them too, just because of the extra weight. It's like hitting with a racquetball. Not worth it. Stick to Technofiber or Caracal, red dot or blue dot. Comment your squash ball of choice down below. Now you've got an idea of what all of these look like and what they mean, we're just going to go through a couple that I don't have right now, and ones that I wouldn't really recommend using. Some people make a white dot. Now, I haven't actually used a white dot before, but I believe that's super quick as well. But the other one that I find very interesting is actually the green dot. And the green dot is an altitude ball, so it's even slower than the double yellow dot, I believe, because obviously the air's thinner, so the ball whizzes around faster. So it needs to be even more dead. You don't need to worry about that unless you're in one of those environments, but if you are, then the green dot is probably the one to go for if you're a good player. If you're not, then maybe a double yellow is the one to go for, but that's very niche, so don't worry too much about that. The last ball to mention is actually the white ball used on a glass court, so it shows up against the darker background. Now, obviously there's no point in using this ball on a normal court, as it would be impossible to see, but I do find it interesting that these balls have a single yellow dot on them. I'm not sure if that means that they bounce the equivalent amount of a normal single yellow dot squash ball. This could be the case, as the glass is typically more dead than a normal court, so it might require it being a bit bouncier for the ball to stay alive on the court and actually be able to get through to a full length most of the time. Or a white squash ball could just be its own thing and just have one dot on it for whatever reason. I'm not really too sure. But either way, I think it's pretty interesting. Are you tired of all your different squash balls getting mixed up in the bottom of your bag? That's where Boller comes in. This functional squash ball holder is the perfect tool to organise squash balls in your bag so that you can find them in an instant. Squash balls slot comfortably inside with no risk of falling out, but they're also easy to remove whenever they're needed for use. There are multiple colours and sizes too, so you can separate your red dots from your double yellows. This is perfect for my coaching, as players of different abilities will require different balls. It's also the ideal gift to give someone for Christmas. Boller also offers club packs for bulk purchases. There's more good news too. With my promo code in the video description, you can get 15% off your purchase at boller.store. Thanks for watching guys, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. See you next time.